Hello, welcome back to I Got Me's Abode, where I'm your host Rebecca and I discuss things all about Jesus and all Christ related. So for today's video, I want to talk about anger and how Jesus dealt with his frustration, because out of anyone who should have been frustrated with anybody, Jesus had the right to be frustrated with us more than we have any right to be mad at anybody. Kind of bummed because my light just broke as I was about to start filming, but we're still gonna keep going. So how do you typically respond whenever you're angry? A lot of the normal human responses are people yell, or they get quiet, or they like start gossiping, or they just, all of these destructive habits start to begin whenever we get angry. That's why that verse says, be angry and do not sin. Because you can be angry and you can also not sin by choosing not to act on that anger. And that's exactly what Jesus did with quite literally all of us, because he had the right to be angry with us more than anyone. But instead of being angry, he showed mercy and he showed compassion, because he knew that we essentially are blind, that we don't know what we're doing. Like when he was on the cross hanging there, he said, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they're doing, because we really don't, we're blind. He was the only one with clear sight and a clear perspective that wasn't skewed by sin, because he was the only one who wasn't born into sin. We, the rest of us, all of humanity, we were all born into sin except Jesus. An example, the best way I could put this is like, imagine you're in a room full of people and you're the only person in the room who can see a specific color that nobody else can see. Imagine how frustrating it would be to try to explain to other people what that color looks like, or what it is. Because explaining a color is hard enough in itself, but imagine explaining it to someone who has never seen it before in their lives. I can imagine that's how Jesus felt trying to explain the kingdom of heaven to people who were blind, who didn't know any better, who were lost sheep, and especially to the Pharisees who idolized their own wisdom and their own will above Jesus. I mean, even for the disciples, it was very hard for them to grasp the understanding that Jesus is who he says he is, and all the things that he was talking about, preaching about the kingdom of heaven. Because out of everyone that Jesus encountered, it was the people who were most likely around him the least who had the most faith. Like how I talked about in my previous video, the bleeding woman, or the Roman centurion, or the paralyzed man. These are all people that weren't necessarily walking with Jesus like the disciples were. But the disciples, they were around Jesus so often, but they were the ones who would doubt the most. And two stories that come to mind is both of them on the water, which was when Jesus calms the storm. This is a pretty infamous story when he calms the storm, and they freak out, you know, the disciples are freaking out, and they wake him up. They're like, Lord, like, please help us, like, we don't know what's going on, we're gonna die. Like, they're just frantic, and Jesus is like, where's your faith? And he calms the storm in an instant, and they're just sitting there amazed, because they're like, whoa. Like, who is this man? And even with Peter, you know, when he walked on water, he turned away for just a second and he ended up falling in the water, and Jesus asked him, like, where's your faith, you little faith? Like, what's going on? Because they saw all of the miracles that he did, they walked with him, yet still had all these questions and doubt in their minds. Because that's a hard thing to grasp. I mean, imagine living in a world where things were so religious and they weren't necessarily spiritual, and then all of a sudden the tides turned completely I think any one of us, if we were to be in the position of the disciples, would be just as doubtful and just as confused, because Jesus quite literally like flipped everybody's world upside down and was like, hey, you guys, like, come on now, this isn't the right way to do things. He showed them the way in the most merciful, compassionate way that he could, which is exactly the route that we should take whenever we're feeling frustrated with people or even frustrated with ourselves. We should follow Jesus in his steps of mercy. There's this verse in Matthew 12:7 which states, you know, Jesus is talking to the Pharisees and he says, I desire mercy, not sacrifice. Because you can sacrifice so many things in your life, but if you don't have mercy, which at the root of mercy is love, if you don't have that for other people and show that to other people, then you have nothing, because you can sacrifice all the things, but without love it's all pointless. Sacrificing is very important, like sacrificing your old ways of life is very, very important. But if you don't have mercy, then you don't have the love that is needed for Jesus to transform you so that you can be more like him. Because to be merciful is to be more like him in character and to represent him correctly in your new life, walking with him and living for him. Because at the end of the day, the goal is Jesus. He is the goal. To bring people to him is the goal. To talk about him is the goal. To preach the gospel about him is the goal. Jesus is the goal. That's it, point blank, period. And I think a lot of the times, I'm talking to myself too, we can all get very wrapped up in the concerns of people and very just worldly human concerns that are all temporary, rather than focusing on the concerns of God that are eternal, like where someone's soul is going to go. That's where us Christians are supposed to step in and tell people about Jesus and talk about his goodness, talk about what he did for us, talk about the resurrection, so that way people's souls are saved, because that's what God's concerned about. Because all of this stuff is going to burn and waste away, because nothing in this world, nothing on this earth is eternal. It's all temporary. So if it's all going to burn away anyways, and the only thing that's going to last is your soul and your decisions that decide where your soul is going to go, then why not make that the number one thing, the number one concern that we all need to be focused on? And you can actually see it right now in the media and just in the world in general. There seems to be the wheat and the tares just growing together like wildfire. Oh my goodness, it's actually really insane to see. A wheat is growing more and more. I see Christian podcasts and Christian artists, you know, popping up out of everywhere. And I also see, you know, the other side. There are also demonic forces that are popping up out of everywhere, trying to clash with the Christian side and derail the message of God and try to lose souls and keep those souls lost. And that's why it's important to not act out in your anger, to be merciful, like how Jesus was merciful and even cried out to God the Father, asking him, telling him to forgive the people who are killing him because they don't know what they're doing. And that's the heart posture we should have towards people who are lost. They don't know what they're doing. I didn't know what I was doing when I was lost. Oh my goodness gracious, I was a whole nother person. To have that mercy towards someone, you never know how that's going to impact them. Because when you're merciful towards them, they see Jesus in you, and that could be planting a seed within them that God will water later on in their life for the assignment that he has for them in their lifetime. Next time you maybe get upset with somebody, whether it could be rightfully so or not, and this is something that I'm also learning and God is refining me on, is to, instead of acting out in anger or gossiping and slandering and all these negative things that come from the heart. Instead of doing all that stuff, try to instead just pray in that instance, you know, like, Lord have mercy, literally. And then take a breath and remember to be merciful, because if anyone has a right to be angry, it's God. He has a right to be angry with us, but he chooses not to. He chooses to be merciful and to love us instead of being angry with us. I hope this video was helpful and insightful on your walk with God and getting closer to Jesus and be more like him. If it helped, or if you know someone it'll help, then you can go ahead and like and share, you can subscribe, all that fun stuff. I hope you have a good rest of your day, good rest of your night, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.